Lexington's old courthouse plaza has long been an issue of debate among preservationists in the bluegrass. The building itself was constructed in 1898 and was actually the fifth to stand in the same location. It was built to be an impressive monument to the city and has been the center of downtown Lexington for over 100 years. Jim Birchfield speaks briefly about the history of the courthouse.
They've had courthouses for a long time. The courthouse that's there now, I think, is the fifth courthouse. And Clay Lancaster writes them up in his Vestiges of the Venerable City. And in antebellum houses and in his photograph collection, he starts out with log structures, stone structures, brick structures. So he has a log courthouse in 1780, a stone courthouse in 1788, a brick courthouse in 1806, and then they become more sophisticated. And there's a Renaissance courthouse in 83, 84, and in 1898, 1890, a Romanesque-style courthouse, which is the courthouse that's standing now.
Walking up the front steps is quite a sight. The massive limestone staircase that once saw criminals and prominent figures alike is now cut in half by a fence covered with trash. I spoke to David Burton as he sat underneath the pavilion.
I wouldn't even known it was a courthouse if I hadn't lived here for a while. I mean, it looks like an old piece of crap building.
The city found lead within the building in 2003, essentially forcing the building into its current abandoned state. The building itself sits inside a chain link fence and is weathering further into the surrounding landscape each day.
So the question is, that building is still standing, and so what do you do with it?
Yeah, exactly.
And why should you keep it? And there was a man whose name was C. Frank Dunn, and C. Frank Dunn was the editor of a publication put out by the state called Kentucky Progress Magazine. And he was a local journalist and wrote a lot for the Lexington Leader, and he wrote about buildings. He wrote about many, many buildings. And Benny Lee Maston, who was his successor in writing about architecture in Lexington, said that Mr. Dunn's vision was to think of Lexington as a successor to Colonial Williamsburg. At about this time in the 30s, John D. Rockefeller Jr. was restoring Colonial Williamsburg. And so this Lexington was very early, it was 1775, and out in the West. And it was so full of early buildings, hundreds of them, that he thought that a big effort should be made to try to preserve what was here in early Lexington. It's kind of a curiosity. You go up this stairway, and at the very top, you can just barely see there was a bust of Henry Clay, which again shows its museum from the original use of the building. It really had a museum kind of applications with paintings of the judges and paintings of important civic figures and busts of people like Henry Clay.
The importance of this building, however, never seems to have gone completely unnoticed. In 2001, when the new Fayette County Courthouse was built just around the corner on North Limestone, the old one was converted into the Lexington History Museum.
There was an exhibition at the Lexington Camera Club in 1954 called Focus on Lexington and Fayette County. And out of that exhibition, four of the entries were photographs of the courthouse, which I think tends to show the importance of the building.
The intentions were good, however there was not nearly enough community support for the museum to be a success. Yet it seems that Lexington has another chance to save this important piece of history. The city has set aside just under $30 million to fund a restoration. The exact details of the project are still underway, but the most likely conclusion would be to restore the building in a way to benefit the community. In other words, it will not be restored to serve its original purpose as a courthouse. In the past few months, the city's new inclusion of the courthouse on its budget was not the only thing to draw attention to the building. With the Breeders' Cup less than a month away, the surrounding area of Cheapside and Short Street have been receiving a lot of extra attention. Short Street was repainted to accommodate hundreds, if not thousands, of extra people, and planters were added to the so-called green space that was created in order to promote more pedestrian activity.
It looks really out of place because they have like really nice buildings and a nice like little pavilion thing for the farmers market, but then there's like a eyesore in the middle of it.
The fact that the old courthouse will be right in front of thousands of people coming to Lexington for the first time may give off the wrong impression. Visitors will surely wonder why, after reading the historical marker, why such an important building is sitting vacant and abandoned in the center of Lexington. At first glance, it appears that the building is somehow associated with the neighboring 21C Hotel project. However, upon closer inspection, the opposite is determined. Through the chain link fence and the windows, I can see the ceiling tiles are falling down, paint is peeling, and the normal signs of deterioration are evident.
If they're going to restore it, I think they should use it for, obviously not a courthouse because it's not really big enough, but maybe they could use it for like a visiting center or like City Hall or something, because it would be really nice inside if they restored it. I don't know what it looks like on the inside, but it looks really nice on the outside for the most part, so it's probably worth restoring to keep it, because it's a part of downtown Lexington. It doesn't look like it should be torn down on the outside when you walk by it, but it does look like it needs work because there's fences around it.
Preservationists have long been pushing to save this building because of its history. To even think that there is a possibility of demolishing the building is appalling. But the key to this project, much like any other, is to gain support and awareness for the cause. Now that the funding is available, the project should gain momentum in the near future. In fact, an architect was recently selected to oversee the project.
This is Ned Breathitt, the ex-governor's wife, decides the UK Art Museum should go in there. So then they think, well, they'll make it the Art Museum and the History Museum. And then they put the Isaac Scott Hathaway Museum in there also. He was a black sculptor who did, Booker T. Washington, he did Paul Laurence Dunbar. He did important work and was widely recognized. And then they wanted to put a firefighters museum in there. It got to be, quite a scheme for different things you could put in the courthouse.
Many people of Lexington have become weary of building proposals after seeing an entire block of historic buildings destroyed with promises of a new city center, Centerpoint, only to receive a giant hole in the middle of the city after over 5 years. Ironically, the destruction of the Centerpoint project actually promoted growth and development in the old courthouse plaza. After the Centerpoint block was demolished, the Lexington Farmers Market no longer had a place to sell their produce, which prompted Fifth Third Bank to build their pavilion, which now hosts the farmers market along with live music acts and other forms of entertainment.
The courthouse is kind of it for a period example of the Romanesque style. And historically, that site was really the center and anchor of the downtown and the scene of a lot of political and historical activity. And it has a great sense of monumentality. It's a big hulking anchor to the downtown right in the middle. There's one fellow who says that the center of Fayette County is in the West Hall of the old courthouse there.
Every Saturday, hundreds of people gather to buy local food and other goods right in front of the old courthouse. Imagine if the courthouse was open to visitors and served some purpose. People would surely visit, if not venture downtown for the sole purpose of going there. Before the Fifth Third Pavilion, the courthouse plaza and Cheapside were degrading and had very little interest from the public. The hope seems to be that the restoration of the courthouse will promote even more community involvement as well as economic and cultural growth for surrounding homes and businesses.
I think people in their mind see it remaining right there, and the question is, what role is it going to play? Yeah. And what kind of changes would you make?